I want to welcome my good friend Abhishek for joining me.
What's up, man?
Just going to give a short introduction of his long list of accolades. Right now, Abhishek is a senior product manager at Amazon and also a graduate of the Harvard Business School, one of the most prestigious business schools in the world, like top 5 most selective. An amazing accomplishment. I just want to start by asking you, like, what was your journey like to get there?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I can't say that it was necessarily something I always like had a plan to do. I kind of always sort of lived each step of my life from like goal to goal. After I was working for a couple years, it kind of became clear to me that I wanted to like make a change and just have a higher ceiling in my career. And I decided that that was a path that was available to me, like just going to business school in general. And based on, that journey of understanding all the options, what roads that could open in the future, I ended up investing like a lot of time in that process, right? I think any of these, it's kind of like all these things people achieve, you only see like that end, like, right. Okay, this person graduated from, college, but you don't see all the work that they put in and the motivation it requires to reach all those like smaller milestones before anyone really sees any results. But once I knew like that was a path I wanted to achieve, I kind of put myself all into the process of like getting there, right? And doing as well as I could, doing that process justice so that I could, create the best result for myself.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. It seems like you came to a decision that one day this is something that you want to do. Did you ever have any doubts about whether you'd go to graduate school at all? Like, what do you think led to that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I was not necessarily planning to go when I started my job, like my first job after college, right? So I graduated my undergrad from UCSB in chemical engineering. And when you're in undergrad, you're very much like you think about what you're learning about, and that's like you're in your bubble, right? In every community, you're always in your bubble, whatever that may be. I think I considered going to graduate school for engineering and doing like a PhD because I had, a lot of professors that were PhDs. I worked with grad students. I did undergrad research. I was thinking about like technical issues. So that was in the back of my mind, but ultimately I just decided that wasn't like I wasn't sure enough to commit like that 6 years of my life as the next step. So I thought I'd start working first and see where it goes. And then, I mean, I remember even having like a conversation with my neighbor. When I started working, I went back home to visit. I started working, and my neighbor's like, "I think you would probably go to grad school at some point." I was like, "No, I'm done. Like, I'm happy. I'm chilling. Like, it's pretty nice working, but I guess the world works in mysterious ways." At some point, the decision became clear to me that that was a step I wanted to take to give myself the flexibility I wanted in life. So I would say, yes and no. It's never like I thought it was never something I could do. I never imagined I would go to Harvard to do my MBA when I was 18, 22. Like, never imagined that would be what I did. Ultimately, I ended up going when I was 26. So that's just like in that 4-year period, I guess. You learn about new perspective, or I guess new pathways, right? And what may be attainable for you and where that can take in your life.
There are a lot of young people, even me, I'm kind of in that stage of life where I'm like, what I want to do for graduate school. If you could give any advice to young people who are thinking about graduate school and they don't know whether it's right for them or not, what advice would you give them about knowing whether graduate school is the next step for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's something you ask yourself a lot in the application process or like that journey. It's really a journey, right? Like, even if I think for most graduate schools, between when you decide you might apply and when you actually apply, it's like anywhere from like 8 to 12 months. just because there's one application a year usually, maybe 2 or 3, depending on the programs. But there's one cycle a year, and at the beginning, you feel like a ton of pressure to like make this decision. Like, I'm going to go to this school or I'm going to apply to this program. Mm-hmm. But really, like throughout that time period, you have like a lot of time to think, reflect, and then make decisions along the way, right? So I guess my advice would be not to be like so caught up on the decision of like, is this the right thing for me? But just kind of start the process, start learning about what do you need to do to go to this program? Like, what are students there saying about the program? Just do that like research organically and stop putting like pressure on yourself to like make a decision. Because I think you could probably apply this to so many things in life, right? Like there's so much pressure we put on ourselves that we have to make this decision at this time. We have to know what we're doing next. But if you kind of just let yourself follow the process, those things kind of fall in place over time, right? And I mean, even when I was at the stage where I had gotten into some programs and I was still waiting to hear back from others, I was still kind of like thinking about whether I should do this, right? I think the decision was a lot easier after I got into Harvard. To be completely honest with you, because like that, because I mean that's like a a total privilege, an amazing opportunity, right? But and I think you would find that feeling if you found an opportunity and that like spoke to you, or you felt like you couldn't pass up, right? But as you're kind of going through this process, you're not going to know stuff. You're not going to know what you want to do. You're going to discover that along the way. And you don't necessarily, you need to have enough motivation to like get yourself to do the work. But that's different from like knowing exactly what you want to do. Right? You got to get yourself kind of going in a direction, I think is a key.
Yeah, sort of overcome that paralysis analysis that can stop us from pursuing opportunities.
Yeah. I
think
say it better myself.
It's interesting. You mentioned like as soon as you got into Harvard, like you knew where you wanted to go. If someone sort of like they're applying to graduate schools or getting in, do you have any advice for like that process for how they should decide this is the right place for them?
I think you have to go visit. Honestly, you have to go and see a campus and feel the vibe of the school. And I think I could give that same advice to someone who is picking their college, undergraduate, university, like, and in that case, like, I mean, you don't have to go before you apply to all these schools, right? You can apply to a set and then go after you get in, right? I understand it is expensive to go travel. You have to take time off work. It's a privilege to be able to go visit universities and learn about programs before you travel. I think like the conventional advice takes that for granted 100%. I remember when I was like 18 and applying to colleges, I felt like I was missing something because my parents were like, we don't have time to like travel and take you to these places before you apply. We'll figure it out later. But like do it after, it's fine. But you have to kind of step foot and feel like the culture of the university and the community. Like pamphlets don't necessarily, fill that in. And it's part of the investment, I guess, of going to school. Like, it's going to cost some money to go out there and make a trip. And sometimes it seems kind of unnecessary. But like on paper, like when I was picking my undergraduate university, on paper, I think I probably should have gone one place. But when I stepped foot on campus at UCSB, I was like, I would love to spend 4 years here. I think when I visited Harvard as well, like, I just knew that was a special place, like a very unique type of MBA program, and just a unique history that is proven, I guess, in a way, and established kind of like timeless lessons. This type of, you get these, I don't know what the right word is, but you get the vibe of the program and the school that they can't really convey necessarily in the words, right? So it's important to go there, take it in and, build your own vocabulary about how you feel about it, essentially.
I think it's interesting, when talking to someone as successful as yourself, I feel like we generally don't get the chance to ask successful people who've gone to Harvard, these types of questions. Something I like to ask people, I'm a big fan of like life philosophy type stuff. How did you hold yourself accountable? Like, what standards did you hold yourself to get to that point where you were going to Harvard?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing from, I guess, standards that I hold myself to, things that I'm always trying to stay true to, is making sure that I build good relationships with other people
Mm.
along all this
Mm.
way. So I think, we have our personal goals, but in order, I really believe that these types of things are marathons and not races. And, you kind of hear earlier when I'm talking about how this is a long 8 to 12 month process, right? I think it's super important to stay invested in like the key relationships in your life. You can't like burn yourself out by saying like, I'm going to be so dedicated to this process of applying to something that I'm not going to pay attention to my personal relationships, or I'm not going to treat people with respect at work because I'm just prioritizing myself. And I think that sort of, as I went through my program and my learning path, like that has become like more of my identity or like my standards. I think that's a super important thing. Like I can also like provide through my professional life is like just helping people feel like they're respected, feel like they're able to share their opinions, and that we're able to like create things together. I think that's just like a really powerful way to like view how you operate in your environment, right? So I think I always try to keep that key and try to figure out how I can like apply that to different areas of my life. I think for me, I feel like I've just been lucky. Motivation has been like something that I can kind of generate. So like for me, like standards of work ethic, I think I just grew up like seeing that, right? Like my parents are first generation immigrants. Um, so I've seen work ethic, and work ethic is something I've been blessed to like grow up with, having that ingrained in my personality in my life. I think what I've developed like very personally over time is like making sure I keep a high standard for how I treat other people that are in my life, and like it extends beyond just like the most important people, but just how you treat everybody. Uh, I think it just helps you, feel like you're more than just like this one thing you're focused on. And that allows you to like run a race, run a long race instead of just doing sprints as you're trying to achieve like short term goals.
Gotcha. How you treat others, I feel like it's one of the most important things like that you need to consider in your life for sure.
Yeah, and it's easy to kind of not pay attention to it, when you have so much else happening, right? Like most people who are applying to graduate school are already working, or they're at least full time students, right? Like no one's not busy who's applying to graduate school, and it's easy to get overwhelmed and deprioritize other people.
Mm-hmm. One of the last questions I want to ask you, you know, as we go through life, like we get lots of different experiences, and maybe there are sometimes we look back at something and we're like, I do something different. If you could sort of like restart your life, is there anything that you would do differently?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough question. I think it's hard to. So, like, there is a great. So, I went through a phase at some point when I was watching like commencement speeches on YouTube, and there's like a legendary one by Steve Jobs at Stanford. It's probably one of the most famous commencement speeches. I don't know. Have you seen this one?
I haven't seen Steve Jobs.
So basically, he talks about this concept where Steve Jobs lived like a crazy life. He went to Reed College. He was studying like linguistics or something about like writing, like how languages were developed. And then he dropped out of Reed College. He was like basically like living in his friends' dorms. and just dropping into random classes. And he talks about how like these random classes that he took were how he was able to like develop his conviction around how Macs need to have like beautiful typography.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't just look like a dev console essentially, right? And that is why like all computers developed like nice typography. And that like his idea there was like, he said this, his phrase was, you can't connect the dots like looking forward, you can only connect them looking back, right? So you can only really see how what you did got you to where you were. And it's really hard to like think about like, I'll do X, Y, Z, and like you got to plan some things, right? Like, of course, we're not all going to end up like Steve Jobs if we drop out of college or if we quit our jobs and do whatever, our heart desires. But, this idea of kind of going back and rethinking what I would have done, I don't know if I would be a different person, right? And I think I try to just live my life with that perspective that, I have some idea of what I want to do. I know what my values are, what I care about doing in work and in my personal life. And based on where that takes me in the short, medium, and long term, like be that as it may, right? I think that's like the only way you can really live. So looking back on what I could have done differently would have probably led me to a different place, which would also be fine, right? But it's not really the type of questions that I dwell too much on.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, last two questions here. Do you have any book recommendations for the listeners?
Yeah, so it's kind of, the title is very cheesy, but it's like a classic book by Dan Carnegie. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I think it is really just about how to like make sure people feel that you care about them, you're treating them with respect and giving them your time and energy. Just how to do that in a very like simple, quick way so that, you have a lot of positive interactions with people. I think, we're talking about grad school and, the MBA process. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things in having a successful career is just being able to like have positive relationships with other people in your organization. Gotcha. Right. So that's definitely one that I think I read it when I was like 20. I honestly haven't reread it in a while and I probably should. But I remember reading that and being like, wow, okay, this is awesome. It's like simple things like make sure you remember people's names, right? Like people love to know that someone remembered their name. Like just simple things to help people feel recognized. It's not necessarily like tricks, right? There's nothing that has to feel like, that's why I kind of take issue with the title. Like you're not trying to win friends. You're just like being a good person, But I think the content is good. And there's a reason it's like a timeless book. I think this book is written in like the first half of the 20th century. I may be wrong on that, but it's definitely old. The lessons are super true today. Yeah.
If there's one piece of life advice you'd give people, what would it be?
I think it's just don't put too much pressure on yourself to do what other people are doing. I think it's easy to, you have goals for yourself, but they should be goals for yourself and not, because X person is doing, whatever they may be doing. Live your life by your rules, by your standards, as you were saying, and those may be different for you than what they are for your friends or your family. And just make sure you're clear on that. Take time to, reflect on what matters to you. Make sure you're taking steps to reflect what matters to you in your everyday actions.
Awesome. Very well said. All right. Where can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram as well. We'll drop the links, I guess.
We'll put it somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for the interview. It was awesome.